Okay, so before we put on this brake caliper, I just want to, talk about it for a second if you're not familiar with these things. So basically how these operate, the brake line ends up going in here. You remove this cap. This is the bleeder valve. We'll talk about that later. So with the brake caliper, it should come with these two bolts. These are for here. And it should also come, you may or may not need to use these. These are, I believe they're called like slider rails, but I might be wrong on that. That's what I call them. I'll explain that too. And most importantly, this is the bolt that holds on the brake line. It's a special bolt, has a little hole in there, and that allows the brake fluid to flow like it's a hollowed out bolt. So don't super over tighten these things. They come with some very special washers, which they're kind of like, I think they're called compressible washers or compress washers. Basically they end up self-sealing. So they're soft copper and they provide the seal between the nut head and the caliper. So very important that you get these items with the caliper kit. Reasons to replace it. Probably the common reason is that it has failed the cylinder, or not the cylinder, I guess the cylinder or piston. It seizes up, so when you apply your brakes, this piston moves in and out, and it squashes the brake pads onto the onto your onto your brake rotor. It's early in the morning. Give me a break, folks. No pun intended. Now, this is the American price. This is at Napa. It's about $54. This is again for the rear left. And if you're unsure what side of a vehicle is, when you're going to the store, when you're sitting in the vehicle, your left is the left. That's the left side of the vehicle. Not when you're facing it. Always from the perspective of sitting in the vehicle. The left rear is the driver's side rear. The right one is slightly different. The front ones are a little bit different. So from left and right, so you need to know that. The American price at Napa, about $54. In Canada, they're actually $110. I did find this one at Part Source, or same thing, Canadian Tire, and I actually got this one for $80. You might be paying for some quality here. Maybe it's a little bit more at Napa in Canada than the Canadian Tire. I'm not sure, just speculating. So let's get started, and it's really easy to do whether you're doing the rears, the rear calipers or the front. The process is all pretty much the same, and I'll also include showing you how to bleed out one of these brakes too. Let's go out and get started. Okay, so all we need to do to get the caliper off, this bolt and this bolt. Remove the brake line first. Mine is already off. I'll explain why, but it's just bolted there. Make sure that's off, and then get these two bolts out. There we go. Let's go inside and we're going to talk about this. Okay, FYI, I do have a full video on replacing the rotors and pads for the truck. I'll put a link. But I thought this would be a great time, since I have to replace the caliper, to just show you why I ended up having to replace this thing. You can notice how rusty it is. Now, you want to do a quick check to make sure that they looks like it's the proper one, and to me it looks good. Just the shape, the profile, all good. I had an issue with my brake line recently where it rusted out. I had to replace a section, and I went to bleed the brakes. So this is where the bleeder tube is. I tried to unscrew that, totally rusted in, and it just spun itself off. So I thought, okay, that's not a big deal. It's still sealed. But then I went to disconnect the brake line from here because I could bleed them using this too. And of course, that one totally broke off because it's so corroded. You might have noticed in the video, I didn't have a lot of trouble getting these bolts out. I'll tell you why, because when I put things together again, I have this old nasty looking tube of white lithium grease, and I coat everything. Here's the pads. I loosened them up a little bit. They just basically, you knock them out, and hopefully I can take this one out. So this should just pull out. As I say, very corroded. There we go. Okay. I think. Okay, so this pad is out. Then this one, this is the side with the piston. Pull that out. You have to put this one in first. If you're not replacing this caliper and you're just doing brakes, which you'll see in the video if you decide to watch it, about how to do the complete job, you have to compress this cylinder when you're going to put them back on because it sticks out. The new one, of course, is flush, but if it's sticking out, you can't fit these over the brake rotor. So just something, you use a C-clamp. It's in my video. It's self-explanatory, and hopefully my arm hasn't been in the way the entire time here. There we go. So that's all set. Okay, so let's get this thing ready to roll. Let's just start off with the two bolts that attach it. Now again, the reason I had no issue taking this apart, because I always put some lithium grease on things. Lithium grease can take high temperatures, so it's really good. So let's get this all prepped up. It's all good. Slide that in. Same with this one. Get it on the threads and up on to the inner side of the bolt there. Slide that in. Now the bleeder valve too, this you have to be a little bit more careful because you don't want to get any grease down into this area. You know, there's a little hole there for the fluid to flow out for bleeding them. But get a little bit of grease, especially on the upper portion here, about the upper half. That's going to prevent that corrosion from happening. Just going to make your life easier in the future if you ever have to bleed your brakes again for some reason. And let's get that set. That's a 10 mil, by the way. Most of them are 10 mil. These are 10 mil. This is where you want to be a little bit more careful with the grease. Let's get this cap out of here. And how this works, there's going to be the one washer there, which will fit into place. And then you'd put the, it's a brass fitting for the brake line. Goes onto there. So the fitting goes on, and then make sure you have the washer here. And then, you know, it compresses it together. Now don't put any lithium grease on these threads for the brake line one, but what you can do is just put a little bit, just put a film on these washers, because you don't want to get the lithium grease into the brake system, but put a little bit of film on there. And I'm just going to put this in here for now for safekeeping. And so at this point, we're ready to go back outside. Okay, so here's the caliper. You need to compress both sides in like this. And you have to put this bolt in because otherwise you won't be able to get it in after. Just make sure it's not sticking in the way. The other one, it doesn't really matter, but you can't have it sticking in the way either. But if you don't put this one in before you put this on, you won't be able to get this bolt in because stuff is in the way. So to put this on, start at the bottom. The slider rails are along here. You'll see them. Put the bottom in place. Line up the shoes on the disc here, and then just rotate it forward. Knock that into place. And be careful with these. You should be able to start them with your fingers. You don't want to cross thread things. Try the back here. Hopefully that's going to go in. And yes, it is. I got lucky. It lined up perfectly. And so let's just go ahead. It's a 10 mil. But it tightens up pretty quick. This one, I have both. They're both kind of like already snug. So how tight? Well, they snug up, and then, you know, give them like about 1/8 of a turn, like that. Snug, 1/8 of a turn. Okay, so we're set there. Okay, so the caliper is actually attached, all good. The next thing is we have to put on that brake line now. So I just put this in here, but we have to take this out, get the washer set up properly. I'm just getting the washer off here. So the first washer, make sure it fits nice. It should, especially with that little bit of grease on there, it will sit in there nice and nice for you. And here's the brass coupling. Let's get this bolt through here. And we'll get this started. There's a notch here, it fits into place. I'm gonna get my, where's my socket here? And FYI, that was it is a 11 mil. Things should turn in smoothly. If things are tough or tight, it means you have a situation like it's cross-threaded, and you know, just don't keep trying to turn it in, or else you're gonna end up wrecking everything. Okay, just started to seat now, and you don't want to go crazy on this. So it's kind of like tightened up now, and just gonna give it. When you're using a small wrench like this, it's not likely that you're going to over tighten it, but don't get crazy. So it's snugged up and got a few jabs. Okay, so that should be all sealed. And we're ready for the next step. Let's talk about bleeding the brakes. Here's a little cap if you can see it. Take that off now, and I'll get this set up. Make sure it's screwed out a little bit so that brake fluid can flow. Gonna need your 10 mil wrench on here, and sort of get it at the point. Might as well get this set up. So right now it's tight. So right now it's tight like that. It's loose like this, so fluid will flow out of here. So let's leave it like that, and then once we get this set up, bleeding the brakes, then we'll be able to tighten up really quickly. You need this wrench available and on there before you start. Okay, so ideally when you're going to bleed the brakes, it's great to have someone to help you out. But if you don't have anyone to help you out, no big deal. I have a short piece of tubing, so I have to use a little plastic bag here. But normally you'd use like a bottle, put the tubing down into a bottle. And remember, the bleeding screw is loosened off, so fluid will be able to flow out of it. And you need to attach some tubing onto here. Okay, so what's going to happen, I have the tubing right down into the bottom of the bag. I actually have a little bit of brake fluid in there, because if you don't have the tube, whoops, if you do this by yourself and you don't have the tubing sitting in some brake fluid, it's going to suck air up rather than sucking brake fluid back up when you're doing this, because you're getting air out of there. Sorry, I just have to get this tube on here a bit better. There we go. Okay, so I have my tubing on. The tubing goes down into this bag, and the tubing is actually in some fluid right now. If you don't have any fluid in the bag, no big deal, because you're going to be pushing brake fluid out, so it will fill it up. Now, the other important thing now, if you're in a situation where your brakes failed and your brake reservoir is totally empty, that's going to cause you problems. That means you're going to have to bleed all of the brakes. But no, I added some fluid in here. It's way too full, sorry about that, but accident. But anyways, if the reservoir is completely empty, that means there's going to be air in all of your brake lines. So the procedure I'm showing you here, you're going to have to repeat this for all 4 tires. And what you want to do is start at the back of the vehicle. The theory is you start with the longest brake line and then work your way up to the front. So probably the back right, and then the back left, and then the front right, and then the front left. So that's the sequence, but I'm going to show you, we'll get this done. We'll just do it on our own here. And it is great if you have someone to help you, because you can see, they can look and see if there's air still coming through the line and stuff. But I'm just going to pump the brakes enough times where I know that there's not going to be any air in there. You'll end up using some extra fluid, but so let's do that. So as you can see, I'm just pumping the brakes. Just want to pump them. I'm going to probably do mine about 7 times. This is the only one that I know is probably going to have air in it, so it should be good after this. So I'm going to continue on. I'll do 3 more, and then we're going to tighten this up, and then we can remove the bag and check it out. Okay, so we have the brake fluid in here. Looks good. Tighten this up now. There we go. Remove this. Let's go check out in the truck. So when I said to pump the brakes, I'm going to start it up here now. So when we were bleeding the brakes, that valve was open. I was just pushing the pedal down to the floor multiple times. And after you bleed the brakes and you tighten that screw up, they should be very solid. Whereas before, I could just take this and push it right to the floor. Now it's feeling pretty good. So, excellent indication that we've had success. Now, if you still have some sponginess, or it's very easy to push, that might mean there's still air in there, so you're gonna have to take care of that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this was helpful. Come back for more, and ask questions. I always respond to my comments. So take care, have a good day.